Hey, A1 fans, AJ here, and we got the news on what Cisco's announcing today, so stay with us. This is the Art of Network Engineering podcast. In this podcast, we'll explore tools, technologies, and talented people. We aim to bring you information that will expand your skill sets and toolbox and share the stories of fellow network engineers. All right, I am AJ Murray at No Blinky Blinky, and I am joined with Tim Bertino. He is at Tim Bertino on Twitter. Tim, we got some exciting news from Cisco, the little inside scoop, courtesy of the Cisco Champions program. What can we expect from Cisco's announcements today?
Absolutely, AJ. This was definitely, I shouldn't say just the Meraki show, because we're definitely talking about a unification, really, of Catalyst and Meraki flavors of both wired and wireless. And I think that the biggest thing to caveat here, because we are going to talk about both wired and wireless, is I think people might get a little nervous when they hear unification of Catalyst and Meraki. Am I going to lose one or the other? Is Meraki hardware going to go away? And it's just going to be Catalyst devices running Meraki code. Don't fret. We're not there. But yeah, it was really cool to see some of the new Meraki enhancements. Also, conjunction with Catalyst. So we kicked it off in this presentation from Cisco on the wireless side. And the big focus here was something that I wouldn't have necessarily thought about. It was all about directional Wi-Fi 6E, so directional 6 gigahertz. Okay. And where this started was, again, something that I really wouldn't have thought about. And it's all about regulatory requirements depending on your geography.
Okay.
So I didn't know this, but apparently with 6 gigahertz, external antennas are only allowed from a regulatory perspective, essentially in the US. Anywhere else in the world, it's got to be an internal antenna. And obviously there are use cases for 6E in the 6 gigahertz space, right?
Right.
And directional is the use case. So think of areas where you've got a lot of density of devices and people. Mm-hmm. So places like large auditoriums, sports arenas, warehouses, where omnidirectional, the typical indoor omnidirectional AP doesn't make sense. You want directional, you want more APs pointing at devices from a directional standpoint. So that's where this CW9166D1 comes into play. And that was the first question I had is, what is a CW? And that's where this unification of the Meraki and Catalyst teams is coming in. So they're calling CW Cisco Wireless. And what's interesting about these is basically there are different SKUs, but it's the same hardware. So if you're in the US, if you want to order a Catalyst AP, traditional Catalyst AP that's running iOS XE, that would be the CW9166D1-B. Okay. You can also order it with Meraki, which would be a -MR. But it's the same hardware. So you can get just different code. And the thing of it is you can order it Catalyst or Meraki. And if your use case changes over time, you can flash the firmware on the device, on the AP, and run the other. So if you buy the -B for Catalyst and you decide one day that you're going to start running Meraki, you don't have to swap your hardware. You can flash it and have it run Meraki and be in the Meraki dashboard. So I thought that was kind of cool to unify those teams from a hardware perspective, but still let them focus on the software that they specialize in, and just customers know that they can have it either way that they want.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, I think there's a lot of situations I've seen where, customers on one platform and, they make the jump over to the other And now, whether you're going Cisco to Meraki or Meraki back to Catalyst, I should say, not just Cisco, because it's all Cisco in the end.
Yeah.
But if you're going to Catalyst to Meraki, Meraki to Catalyst, it doesn't matter. You don't have to really think like, oh no, I have to buy all new hardware. No. You're just making a switch. Maybe it's just a licensing change or whatever. But once you reflash the code on those APs, they can report to the Meraki dashboard or
Yep.
your wireless controller. So that's a really nice thing to see. The after so many years of Cisco owning Meraki, after that purchase, it's nice to see stuff like this start to happen within the product line.
Definitely. And one thing to note, this specific model, the CW9166D1, was orderable as of August 15th here in 2023. Right. So this one's been out for a little bit yet, but it was cool to see this presentation and hear that use case of something that I wouldn't have thought about otherwise. You always gotta follow the rules, right? Especially when it's stamped by the federal government.
That whole regulatory thing is really interesting to me. I'm a ham radio nut, and so I follow frequencies and all that stuff. So yeah, it's in the country, the frequency allocations might be different, right? And they are around, and especially around wireless. In outside of the United States, there's sometimes more allocations for additional wireless channels or different wireless channels than you have here in the US. And it's like that for a bunch of different things. So the other side of the announcement is some exciting stuff coming from switching. So they are announcing the Catalyst Meraki 9300. So if you're familiar with the beloved 9300 series of Catalyst switches, you'll be happy to know that they'll be orderable for Meraki. You'll have, I guess, more traditional, or maybe what you might be used to with the Catalyst side for stacking, including power stacking or stack power. I forget what they call it. And so it's basically just a 9300 with Meraki code, or code that's ready to talk to the Meraki dashboard out of the box.
And this is where I kind of teased it earlier, in that I think people could hear, they're starting to have the Catalyst 9300 line running Meraki. Does that mean my, what I'll call traditional Meraki hardware, isn't going to get developed anymore? And the answer is no. And the reason that they're bringing more of the Catalyst 9300 line into the Meraki portfolio to run the Meraki code and be a part of the Meraki dashboard is all about a specific use case. So what they've done is they've carved up different use cases. They're looking at industrial environments on one end of the spectrum, and they have the dash R for ruggedized environments of the help me out, AJ. That's the
MS130R.
The MS130R. So that would be on the ruggedized side, and then they have the other side of the MS130 for what they call the branch and the small to medium sized campus, which is really, in my opinion, the bread and butter of Meraki, both on the wired and wireless side, is that small to medium sized campus along with branch environments as well. So what they're trying to do here is target those customers that have Meraki in their environments, because they have small to medium sized campuses and they have the branch environments, but they may have large campuses and large enterprise environments as well. And they want to be able to have Meraki across their small to medium sized campuses. And they want to be able to manage their large campuses out of Meraki too. So they don't have to necessarily have my Meraki environment and my everything else. Right. So that was the big takeaway I had for this announcement, is it's not Catalyst hardware taking over the Meraki side. It's just finding another use case for Catalyst hardware running in Meraki. So you can have the, sorry, I'm going to say it, single pane of glass. I know.
Take a drink.
Yeah. For everything you have in the campus environment. So you don't have to have separate, but you can still leverage those hardware features. Because like we said, some of the bigger campuses may have reasons that they need M gig across all the ports, and they may have needs for the higher UPoE plus and the power stacking and all that good stuff, that they want to not only be able to have those hardware features, but run them in their Meraki environments as well. So it's cool to see the software, the Meraki software, be able to go cross-platform into the non-Meraki hardware that Cisco's had forever.
And I think it makes a lot of sense. Like from an R&D hardware design perspective, if I personally have not seen any Meraki switches that can do like the power stacking, right? And so why try to design that into a product when you already have it? It's probably easier to figure out how to get some of the Meraki code to run natively on a 9300 than it is to try to figure out how we're going to put physical power stacking capabilities into existing Meraki switch lines. And I think it's important to note that this isn't the first time we've seen, a sheep in wolf's clothing or whatever, where a Catalyst switch is posing as a Meraki switch. I think it was the MS390 was just a 3850 with a different faceplate. So, and I think one of the other important reasons that we're seeing Meraki play in a traditional enterprise or large campus environment is that you're typically doing more on those switches. You're talking to ICE or other security players. You're doing 802.1x authentication, and not to say that you can't do that with some of the Meraki switches, but in a larger environment, you're going to need more TCAM and additional processing power natively on the switch to do some of that robust security stuff than some of the other switches in the product line maybe are capable of doing. So in addition to some of the MS130 small, medium-sized campus branch switches, they've come out with like a larger lineup of sub 24 port count for even smaller branches and smaller plays. So, which I think is great because I've been to a few campuses that you didn't need to put a 24 port switch everywhere, and you certainly didn't need to put a 48 port switch anywhere. So some of these smaller port count switches that are PoE capable and have SFP uplinks, they're a great play for a lot of spread out campuses with small offices here and there, or maybe you're setting up a temporary bullpen with a bunch of different cubes or something like that. I think there's a lot of great use cases for managed switches that have less than 24 ports, and it's nice to see this in the Meraki lineup.
Yeah, it's, to me, I go back to the unification of the experience for the user,
Right.
being able to have that management and operation experience, because like you said, you don't need certain switches in all environments. So you may have the smaller branch offices where a 48 port 9300 UXM just doesn't make sense, right? But that customer has, bigger buildings, more use cases for that. So they may just say, well, I might as well just use the same switch. To me, with this approach is customers can get whatever switch they want, whether it be Meraki or Catalyst, and I do think that there are still some limitations. I don't know that it's necessarily all Catalyst 9300 submodels across the board yet, but it's more than it has been. So customers, when they have use cases for the branch or the smaller campus, they want to use Meraki branded switches. The traditional Meraki branded switches, they can go ahead and do that. And their larger campuses, they can have the 9300 UXMs. But guess what? They're all managed in one pane of glass. Sorry, I did it again. Take a drink. In the Meraki dashboard. So people can have their different use cases, but still treat them the same from a management perspective. And something else I took of note was that you have and maybe about this, AJ, because I don't have a whole lot of experience or really any on the Meraki side, but talking about the ability to pre-provision hardware before you have it in your hands. So I almost see that as being able to go into the Meraki dashboard and provision switches. So let's say you have a handful of new branch sites that are coming up, and you've ordered your switches, whether they be Meraki or Catalyst, and you're going to run them in the Meraki dashboard. I'm seeing that as you can essentially provision the site or provision the switches ahead of time, and then once they go get plugged in, maybe by serial number or what have you, I'm not sure, they're able to phone home to the Meraki dashboard and get the config that you provision them for. I'm guessing that's kind of what the use case was.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense, to be able to pre-configure a new site coming online, as long as you are able to adopt the hardware in the dashboard and assign it to the network. Once it gets connected to some sort of internet connection and phones home to the dashboard, it'll just download the config. So I have not personally seen where you can pre-provision before you have the hardware information. I know you can set up the network in some general configuration about it, but certainly not down to the port level until you've adopted a switch. So if they're working on that, where you're able to configure and build out more of the configuration before the hardware arrives, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I'll have to hear more about that. I wasn't sure if that was something that was a new announcement or something that's been around, but I thought that was interesting because I know that I think generally speaking, lead times are getting better, but you're not. Sure. It's not Amazon Prime. You're not ordering your your Meraki and Catalyst switches and getting them 2-day free shipping still. So I can see it being nice as soon as you have the use case for a new site, you're ordering your gear, and then you're able to go on the Meraki dashboard and essentially provision it, at least to an extent. I think that's pretty cool, being able to get out in front of as much as possible.
I think it's really important to emphasize that it doesn't matter what you're buying, whether it's wireless or wired, large campus, small, medium campus, ruggedized, it all reports to the Meraki dashboard. So you have that visibility, all that security, all that really great stuff, the reporting, analytics, everything. Again, doesn't matter what you're getting. It's all right there in the Meraki dashboard. Any other details as part of these announcements?
No major other details. I think it just goes back to, it's pretty cool to see how Cisco's bringing together the Catalyst and the Meraki teams, and rather than treating them as 100% different business units, they're having them talk together and see where they can complement each other. I think makes a ton of sense, and I'm really glad to see it.
Yeah, I agree. I know that it can take time to have two teams like that come together, but it's nice to see that the work they're doing and have been working on for several years now. So no, it's great to hear this kind of announcement, and it's going to make things a whole lot easier for customers everywhere. So excellent. Well, we'll try to keep an ear to the ground, and as we learn new and exciting things, keep checking our YouTube channel and come on back, and we'll continue to post announcements like this. Tim, thank you so much for joining in on this announcement, and we'll see you next time. Hey everyone, this is AJ. If you like what you heard today, then make sure you subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcatcher. Smash that bell icon to get notified of all of our future episodes. Also, follow us on Twitter and Instagram. We are at Art of NetEng. That's Art of NETENG. You can also find us on the web at artofnetworkengineering.com, where we post all of our show notes. You can read blog articles from the co-hosts and guests, and also a lot more news and info from the networking world. Thanks for listening.